Hello, fellow scholars and purveyors of morbid curiosities alike. I'm Dr. Caleb, joined by the additum animal himself, Dr. Zach, and this is SCPod. Zach, how are you today?
Oh, I'm all right. How are you?
Well, I am marginally better. You probably can't hear it very well because of noise gating, but I am not surrounded by people anymore, and thus the podcast should probably be better quality. Honestly, I found myself a little noise-proof room here at Site 13. So, yeah, this is definitely not the worst place I've been to. There's definitely, I don't know. I'm kind of partial to 2095 and the Bone Cathedral, but that was pretty gross to be in, honestly.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, as far as worst places you can go, we sent you to Massachusetts, so I'm not really sure how it could be much worse.
I wasn't gonna say anything, Zach, but you were the one that told the audience that Massachusetts doesn't exist, and
So, Caleb, Dr. Caleb,
I'm
I've
here.
come to a reckoning of sorts with my belief in Massachusetts, and what I'm kind of reaching for is that I think Massachusetts might be the real world analog for the material, or not material, the ethereal plane, and that it's a separate lens of reality that exists in the background peripheries, but it always feels kind of wrong, and nothing good ever comes out of it.
I believe that. I do.
I am informed.
I feel mystical just standing here right now.
That being,
And it would explain all the hazmat suits and everything that I've been wearing.
yeah, that's just Massachusetts, man.
So, Zach, what brings me to Massachusetts today?
So you know how we usually send you to cover things that are ongoing or just immediately happened, or maybe sometimes about to happen.
Yes, that is my duty as the on the ground reporter.
This one is this entry. And I think this is the first time for the show is a presumed neutralized, and so there's in theory nothing to be super afraid of.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to be here. I guess I'll just get into it, and we'll just do you just fill in any cracks with anything that you can think of that might have changed, or maybe the old procedures or whatever. So this week we are covering SCP-2480, the title of which is An Unfinished Ritual, which seems to be finished, honestly. Object class, like Zach said, is presumed neutralized. But it had a roller coaster of an object classification. It started off as safe and then got upgraded to Keter and then neutralized. So this is going to be an action-packed entry. Special containment procedures are as follows. Class A, B, and C amnestics may be used at the discretion of field agents. Foundation personnel have been integrated with the community surrounding SCP-2480 as quarantine or relocation of inhabitants has been deemed unfeasible. Considered the best source of information for SCP-2480 anomalies, agents are to make local inquiries and investigate any rumors, reports, or claims of anomalous nature. Mobile Task Force Epsilon 6, codename Village Idiots, have infiltrated the community and are to remain on the lookout for anomalous manifestations. Mobile Task Force Psi 9, the Abyss Gazers, are to remain on standby in case of an emanation event. The use of force has been authorized, and anomalous manifestations are to be destroyed without prejudice. So, like I said, there's some crazy stuff going on here. This is also the first one. Correct me if I'm wrong, Zach. I think this is the first SCP that we're covering that actually has MTF associated with it.
Oh, I would have to go back and check, but
I know there's mention of them, but none by name. So, Yeah, that's kind of fun. If you want more information regarding Mobile Task Force, please refer to Season 1, Episode 4 with our new hire orientation. Description is as follows. Strap in, this is a doozy. SCP-2480 is believed to be a dimensional anomaly located in Massachusetts in a coastal, heavily forested town. It seems to be centered on Bodfell Manor, home of Cornelius P. Bodfell, a millionaire with a, quote, acute interest in the occult. I don't think that any interest in the occult should be labeled as acute. I don't think that cute and occult should go together.
Speaking from experience, when you have an interest in the occult, it tends to be all-consuming.
Fair. Prior to Bodfell's death in 1952, he was the leader of a secret society known as Adytum's Wake. This secret society was initially dismissed by the Foundation as being a, quote, decadent upper-class social club. And they were not considered anomalous until 1952, which, the dates kind of line up. There was not too much information regarding the cult at first because of a critical failure of the GOC mission where all the agents were dead or missing, and most of the documents were incinerated.
Amateurs.
There was one badly damaged photo found, and the photo seems to be of KTE-0452-black. And Zach, what is the photo?
So the note attached to the photo that I have here on my desk is labeled Grand Karcist Ion. So we're off to a good start. There is an authorized response level of 4, indicating severe threat, with an attached addendum saying that liquidation is pending. Description: KTE-0452 Black, hereafter referred to as the Subject, is a humanoid threat entity of variable appearance. Subject most often appears in priestly vestments and carrying a staff. Subject is able to disappear and reappear at will, shape and manipulate organic material, bend reality, and is hypothesized to be biologically immortal. While Subject is classified as humanoid, they are not believed to be human. Whether or not they ever were is debatable. Psychological profile indicates malignant narcissism and megalomania. Subject is believed to have aided in the creation of, quote, sarkic cults throughout much of the world. See on Sarcasm for further details.
And that's our meat Jesus, folks.
Allegedly.
So that is our tie to sarcasm for the episode, as well as many other things. But continuing on, the GOC operatives were sent to assassinate POI-93, also known as Cornelius Bodfell, but he was not found among the dead. The Foundation intercepted a GOC signal and went to investigate. Upon investigation, 36 corpses were found at around the estate, with 8 being GOC agents. 5 of those GOC agents were found with self-inflicted gunshot wounds to the head, and the rest of the bodies having anomalous means of death, such as implosion, disintegration, and fatal physical reconfiguration, which is oddly similar to 2095 Siege of Gyros. SCP-2480 is hypothesized to be a dimensional anomaly that cannot be directly perceived. Seems to be the only way to see through the cognitohazardous effect is to use perception-altering chemicals, or looking at the space for a very long time. Zach, before I get on to the addendum and stuff, we are talking about a second GOI, and that being the GOC. What can you tell us about the GOC?
So the GOC is a lot to go into depth here. For the purposes of our going over 2480 today, just know that the GOC is sort of like the Foundation, except they work for the United Nations. And rather than containing anomalies, they would like to destroy anomalies.
And real quick, GOC stands for what?
GOC stands for Global Occult Coalition.
Thank you, Dr. Zach.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're basically dealing with the posers of what we do here. So, although we do work with them every once in a while. So, all right. There is an addendum, as well as a bunch of other things regarding this SCP, but the addendum is as follows. The investigation of Bodfell Manor uncovered disconcerting evidence with regards to Cornelius P. Bodfell III and the organization known as Adatum's Wake. Based on some photographs and some diary entries, Bodfell and his followers would engage in giant orgies. Before you get too excited, these orgies included sexual violence, ritual human sacrifice, cannibalism, and so many more things that would get us demonetized. If we made any money from this.
They would get us demonetized if we were monetized.
Exactly. Instead, they just charge us by the word.
No, they don't.
In the diaries, no, they don't. In the diaries were guest lists that include the usual suspects, affluent families, respected politicians, leaders of industry, and those of religious authority, much like a certain famous island. Bodfell had a handwritten tome in an unknown writing system known as the that's a word and a half right there. Valkzaron. In the main hall rests a statue of an entity with a leonine head and vermiform body. Translation for the non-nerds in the audience, Popcorn Zach.
So it has a head of a lion and the body of a worm.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
This statue was later confirmed as a representation of the Demiurge, or Yaldabaoth, Sackless, or Samiel, which a god just being named Samuel is super funny to me.
Well, it's not Samuel, it's Samael, which is the angel of angel of death in Judaism.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
You should be.
I'm not sorry. This demiurge has no history of being worshipped and believed to be the figure of worship for Adatum's Wake. At the bottom of the statue, written in Greek, is the following. Desire is the measure of all things. Be unbound from mortal tethers. Do as you will, to whom you will. Which, yeah, for somebody that would probably be at home on a certain island is definitely something I could see them as their catchphrase being.
Fucking libertarians.
In 1988, Simon Oswald, director of Site-13, failed to send a biannual report of the state of SCP-2480. The Foundation tried to reach out to no avail. Agent Samuel Rowe and Agent Sarah Valentine were sent to investigate, but neither has made contact and their fates are currently unknown. Finally, Mobile Task Force Epsilon 6, once again known as the Village Idiots, were sent to reestablish contact with Site-13 and secure SCP-2480, and were able to integrate into the community successfully. So from there, there is a lot of information going on in this article, and we're going to try and streamline it, but some of it also deserves to be read pretty verbatim. So we have the MTF Epsilon 6 surveillance records. And Zach, if you want to start off just paraphrasing some of these, there's a lot of information in these, but we've cut down on it for the sake of brevity.
All right. So starting with the mission log of Agent Myron Goldstein, on day 6, they report a distinct feeling of wrongness in the town, which isn't, uncommon for this sort of assignment, spooky town in Massachusetts. Again, the ethereal plane. But they give an specific example of a man mowing his lawn at midnight, which they do note as odd for obvious reasons, as well as a man staring unblinking at them in the fish market. On day 11,
I do want to cut in real quick and say that honestly, like, if you were mowing your lawn at midnight to avoid the sun, I feel like that is just society putting its own pressures on you.
Maybe. It's also something that would get you killed as a vampire in the 1600s.
Fair enough. Continue, Zach.
Mm-hmm. So, on day 11, Agent Adam Grayson reported similar feelings of unease, but specifically in their hotel room. When he woke up in the middle of the night, he checked the peephole in the door for his room and saw a face, but couldn't tell if it was a man or woman, But as soon as they looked, they started to slam their head against the door over and over, which is the only kind of behavior you would see in a Motel 6 these days. And then on day 16, moving on to Agent Emma Lightbody, they express concern that they don't know what command is waiting for, and that they know where roughly the anomaly is taking place in Bodefell Manor. They also did report a strange interaction with a local, asking the agent if they were fed, and the local told the agent about monsters in the fog, quote, screaming their secrets, later on finding the local dead the next day. And then lastly, for my part, Agent Frank Giuseppe on day 20 reports that the weather is strange, almost like it's eternally autumn with rain and fog, and that they saw a group of children gathered around a dead dog and eating it in the street. And I've known my fair share of strange children, but that's more than strange child behavior.
I have nothing witty to add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just messed up, man.
General Raccoon City behavior.
Starting on day 30, Emma Lightbody and Giuseppe explore some abandoned buildings in the town, specifically a 2-story house on the waterfront. The inside was covered in gibberish and symbols, and the living room had a small TV with 4 TV trays containing half-eaten meals. The building was seemingly abandoned in the middle of dinner, which is weird as hell. Day 37, exactly 1 week after the last entry, Giuseppe has been missing for 7 days. Told to rendezvous at an old mill but never showed up. His place was weird. Doors were locked, same with the windows, and all the DNA and fingerprints match Giuseppe and no one else. It's like he just ceased to exist. Day 39, Harold Mason goes to a dive bar for information. He buys a few drinks from a lady and gets no information. But then he talks to an old fisherman who says that he lost 2 sisters and a brother to Bodefell. Said the town had a, quote, God-shaped hole in it. Day 40 is the final mission log. Agent Myron Goldstein watches as Agent Grayson dies in front of him. Grayson said he felt like he was being followed, to which Goldstein said that they all felt the same. His eyes were bloodshot and he was constantly twitching too. The hairs on both of their necks rise like lightning is about to strike. Grayson's eyes widened and in an instant he turned into a slurry, just annihilated. A crowd formed, and with some of them smiling and some lowering their heads and going back to their task. No one seemed surprised.
As one does.
Exactly. So, yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on in this town. Par for the course for Massachusetts, I guess. But after these MTF logs, there is the experimental research, in which Dr. Calixto Neves talks about doing some drugs. And we figure for this, it would be so much better for us to just read it verbatim rather than paraphrase it, because I have said multiple times on this show, my PhD is in spooky stuff. Zach's is in, I don't know, drinking nuclear radiation.
Yeah.
And so rather than us trying to understand the science behind all this, why not we let somebody who actually understands it read it in our voice? Mm-hmm. So, Zach, if you would.
All right. The statement of Dr. Calixto Narvaez. Surveillance of the town revealed patterns of possible significance. This includes excessive procreation, the average population household having 12 children, a number of unsupported by census data. Approximately 80% of children born over the last 30 years lack birth certificates or social security numbers. Local inquiries have failed to ascertain why this might be. I suspect religious reasoning similar to the Quiverful. Quiverful, for those of you who don't know, is a Christian and Dominionist movement here in the United States. Cognitive impairment. Many residents appear to have difficulty with memory retention and subsyndromal delirium, also known as mental fatigue. Subtle hallucinations are not uncommon. Drug abuse. The community appears to consume roughly 200% more alcohol than the statewide average. The use of hallucinogens is seemingly non-existent. Disappearances. The number of disappearances within the vicinity of the town is the highest in the state. This has been blamed on geographical features such as dense forest and marshland by local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. The actual number of missing is speculated to be much higher, involving the unreported disappearances of transients and local residents. Suspicious deaths. Many local fatalities suggest foul play and possibly anomalous causes of death. All such deaths have been recorded as accidental or suicide, even with contradictory evidence is provided by law enforcement. Example: a woman was discovered with her body structurally inverted. Police concluded her state was to be self-inflicted, although this would be impossible. Apathy. An unusual malaise affects the town, as should be readily apparent from the previous examples of abnormalities. From my experience with prior anomalies, I hypothesize that we are dealing with an anomaly beyond our senses and that of our technology, one capable of creating a facsimile of baseline reality, invisible but not entirely intangible. Requests access to N-dietrimethylmethane. I am not going to try and pronounce that. I have a bad enough stutter as is. But that's DMT. The doctor is asking for DMT. Previous experiments with human perception have yielded positive results from using DMT. A requisition form has been filed and awaits proper authorization. To better explain the reasoning behind my request. In 1976, I was sent to investigate something in Brazil, a community displaying abnormalities akin to those related to SCP-2480. I eventually came in contact with an indigenous tribe in the southern part of the Brazilian Amazon, a people unaffected but surprisingly aware of the anomaly. I was introduced to their shaman. I learned the aberrations that lurk beyond all mortal sight. The tribe had many words for these anomalies, but the most common could be translated as "none stand where they do," and were associated with a condition known as soul sickness. They were viewed as distinct from the spirits of their animist traditions, referred to as, quote, a living wound upon nature brought to their land by colonists. Their shaman showed me a yopo, and I experienced the world as I saw it. At the time, I merely dismissed it as a hallucination. DMT is commonly held to be a hallucinogen. This is demonstrably false, as noted with my experience with a previous SCP. It is perception enhancer, allowing us to sense which evolution has strangely seen fit to obscure. DMT, when properly administered, should be able to activate this normally dormant level of perception for anyone. To put simply, it removes our perceptual filters so that we may perceive reality for what it really is. And then, Dr. Caleb, back to you for DMT testing 1.
So yeah, the good doctor is taking some DMT. I, Dr. Narvaez, entered the town center at 0900 with an inhaler containing 60 milligrams of DMT and a concealed radio and video feed connected directly to my assistant, Dr. Wu. I intend to use the first hour to observe my surroundings before administering DMT. I inhale the DMT. Within approximately 1 minute, I experience a tingling numbness throughout my body. Colors have become more vivid, and soon a yellow fog cloaks the town. I see people in dark, hooded robes, their outfits appearing to be composed of poorly stitched together leathers and hides. I cannot see their faces, and I feel, instinctively, that I must not look upon them. The majority of locals appear surprisingly normal. They move around or stand aside when the hooded figures approach. Never do they make eye contact. Wu informs me of this odd behavior, noting that the locals appeared to be evading something unseen. I continue to explore. I now see that the buildings are in a state of ruin, covered in a pulsating fleshy material. Wu states that they look perfectly normal to him. I see a drainage system. A black fluid flows through it and carries with it an amber sheen. Wu cannot see it whatsoever. A church in the center of town has been completely replaced by a black ziggurat. The cowled entities prostrate themselves before the structure. I must assume that it holds religious significance. I see a robed entity in the distance. It is abnormally tall and holds several unknown creatures by a leash. I examine the leash more closely. Its composition not unlike that of intestines. The creatures have small, unblinking eyes. Their mouths display several rows of needle-like teeth. Their flesh is a sickly pale, yet muscular. They gibber madly and move with a frenzied pace. Wu tells me that he sees a teacher with young students, possibly on a field trip. I observe several of the creatures attack one of their own, its size suggesting it to be the runt of their pack. They rend its flesh with their talons and teeth as it squeals in pain. Wu states that he sees several of the children bullying another. I avert my eyes, unable to watch more. I look skyward and see tall spires, composed of a chitinous-like material, towering over the town. I do not understand their purpose. I require proof that this hidden world is real, but must obtain it without drawing attention to myself. I remove a bottle of water from my satchel and consume it before backtracking to where I had seen the strange liquid. Crouching down, I fill the plastic container with the viscous substance. The other world begins to fade, and I am returned to reality. The effects of DMT have likely worn off. I turn my eyes to the bottle. It appears empty to my eyes, but I can feel the weight of the liquid. Never before have I experienced anything like this. Besides the organic structures, I recall seeing black banners with a yellow, spiral-like symbol. I felt as though I had seen that glyph before, but its meaning and origin escape recollection. Lab results. Material became visible after its removal from SCP-2480's hypothesized zone of influence. It is black and reflects light with an amber shimmer. Substance is a liquid, although somewhat gelatinous. Microscopic analysis has revealed organelle-like structures resembling free mitochondria in a particularly viscous serum with high levels of identified fatty acids. Research is underway.
Moving on to the second round of DMT testing. Begin log. I, Dr. Narvaez, accompanied by Agent Lightbody and Agent Goldstein, enter the house that, until recently, was occupied by Agent Giuseppe. Initial investigations showed no evidence as to what might have possibly happened, although foul play is assumed. As was done in my previous experiment, I have a live video feed connected to my assistant, Dr. Wu, and intend to inhale 60 milligrams of DMT. After inspecting the building, I administer the DMT. As expected, within approximately 1 minute, I begin to experience a tingling sensation throughout my body. I now perceive the house as it truly is, decaying, covered in excrement and blood. I can smell it, taste it. I imagine this to be what it is like to bite into a tumor. Better to say, a rotten tumor. Tumors are just flesh, after all. In the living room, written on the wall just above the couch, is the phrase, "He is dreaming war. Adytum will rise." The meaning of those words are beyond my understanding. There are some other symbols. They are in a language I have never seen before and impossible to decipher. We intend to search the basement. It is an ancient root cellar. On the far end is a large spiral painted on the wall. I feel compelled to inspect it closer. As I draw closer, the wall fades, yet the symbol remains as if painted upon empty air. Through the archway are descending stairs. As I enter, Wu informs me that I walked into the wall and the camera went black. There is no wall. There never was a wall. Only a clever illusion. The agents are concerned. They cannot see the way. I tell them to close their eyes and step through as I did. Now all three of us are on the other side. They too see the descending stone stairs. We walk down the stairs and enter a tunnel into the bowels of the basement's basement. The walls quiver and tremble with life. Porous, they bleed a sap-like material. Contact with Wu is lost. Our GPS devices fail us. Lightbody looks at her compass. The pointer whirls and twirls. The tunnel divides, branching out in many directions. I choose the path to my left. We walk only a few minutes before reaching a rotted wooden door. I ask the agents if they are able to perceive it as well. They can. We push the door open and enter, only to exit from an old shack of obviously baseline appearance. GPS shows that we are on the entirely opposite side of the town. Contact is reestablished with Dr. Wu. We appear to be in a field of some kind, a yellow fog blanketing the land. Dr. Wu and the agents describe the area as likely abandoned farmland, GPS suggesting that we are relatively close to the Bodfell estate. I inhale another 60 milligrams of DMT. Note: research a way to lengthen the effect, and request that Agent Goldstein take the lead. I feel a sense of dread, but attempted my best to hide it. I hear heavy breathing, even heavier footsteps. The others hear nothing whatsoever. And then the next parts are evidently in retrospect. These notes must be done in retrospect. Goldstein, regrettably, could not see the threat, and I was too slow to react. I mourn his loss, but must describe the encounter in as much detail as possible. I saw the silhouette of a massive humanoid, estimated to be over 4 meters in height. As it shambled out from the fog, I wanted to scream, but attempted to remain calm in order to gather as much data as possible. Physical description: its flesh was pale and flabby, its face dominated by a large, tooth-filled mouth. Entity lacking visible eyes, ears, or nostrils. Its teeth and 3-fingered hands were heavily stained, seemingly caked in viscera. The entity charged us, loping like a colossal gorilla. I informed the others that it would be best that we retreat, but it would prove too late for Agent Goldstein. The entity lifted him with a single hand and bit down into his torso, disemboweling him in the process. We serpentined through the fields, unable to find the shack from which we came. I was unarmed, yet I alone had the means to lead. I should have supplied her with DMT, something I deeply regret in retrospect. I could feel the ground beneath my feet quake. Casting my eyes downward, I saw not soil but fragmented flesh, like harlequin-type ichthyosis. With each step I took, the skin splintered and gushed like an infected, pus-filled wound. The ground would soon rupture with slithering, crimson-colored tendrils. They snatched Agent Lightbody from her ankle, or by her ankle, I should say, pulling her into a hole far too small for any human. I hear her screams and the breaking of bones. I ran and never looked back. I hope this is enough evidence. I have no wish to return to that place. End log.
And that's where I'm currently standing. Maybe not exactly, but...
So do you see grass or skin?
I see grass.
Well, that's good, at least.
That's the drug test, I guess.
Well, I think what you should do, Caleb, is get you about 60 milligrams of DMT and see how that goes.
Sure thing, buddy. Maybe when I'm off the clock.
Well, I mean, he did it on the clock, so I don't think there's a rule against it.
That's for the higher up researchers.
We can be higher up if we believe.
So, based off of the DMT testing, anybody can see that there is a real fucking problem going on in this town.
Yeah.
And so the SCP Foundation, together with the GOC, came up with Operation Citra Acra. And it was an operation to neutralize the town, neutralize the SCP. So, in the article itself, there is the mission log, or the the mission of Citra Acra and a few addendums with it. So starting off, an introductory statement by 05-4. And on time, just like how we thought, Zach.
Mm-hmm.
The hat guy is back.
Hi.
And is he in the room with you too?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna bring it up, but he is.
This is weird.
Dark hair, glasses. Okay, he doesn't like us describing him, so let's move on.
Yeah. So I guess I need to be reading this statement by 05-4 at the risk of being shot. So let's just do it. SCP-2480 is currently projected to lead to an SK class dominance shift by the year 2030. We will not allow this to happen. Our predecessors blamed the global coalition. We assumed, as always, that we knew better. You have been selected to be a part of Project Citra Acra. Welcome to the Invisible War. Another world is bleeding into ours. An invasive colonization of our iteration of reality. Their soldiers do not experience fear or pain. They know nothing of restraint or mercy. They swirl with rumors. Rumors I intend to address. What you have heard is true. Genetic analysis of the enemy has arrived at one conclusion. Mostly human. Do they come from another iteration of our reality? From our future or past? We do not know. They cloak themselves in a facsimile of baseline reality. They will wear the faces of those you love, forcing you to kill, over and over, the very people you are fighting to save. Every word you've heard about these abominations is, in all likelihood, absolutely true. There is but one common myth I wish to dispel. These aberrations can be destroyed, despite various falsehoods that claim otherwise. Make no mistake, we will not achieve our objectives without substantial sacrifice. You will see friends and comrades die, devoured by behemoths, sundered by the cries of jabberers, torn to ribbons by fiends. Despite your significant training, the survival rate of MTF Psi-9 operatives teeters at approximately 55% during the first month of active duty, a vast improvement over the initial rates of mortality. Flesh is their weapon. Ours is a technology, innovation, and the wisdom of those who came long before us. So few had the vision to recognize the threat. This is our world. These are our people. We can live for ourselves today, or help secure tomorrow for everyone. Okay, and I think the hat guy... Zach, has the hat guy left your place?
Yeah, he nodded, gave me a thumbs up, and walked out, so I think we're good.
Oh, okay. Maybe he just wants to be friends, honestly.
I don't think he wants to be friends, Caleb.
A man can dream. But we're not going to talk about him anymore because I don't want him to be two places at once again.
Yeah, that was weird.
So Addendum 2480-1 is the Project Citra Acra Dossier Introductory Documentation. Zach, do you want to cover this a little bit?
Yeah, there's no need to go into it in full. Basically, it outlines the sort of procedure outline for what we're doing here, along with the GOC. It basically outlays that the village idiots are to continue their surveillance operations and intel gathering so that we have better target information for Psi-9, who are again the Abyss Gazers, to go in and clear out targets as necessary. This went on for a period of time up until we were able to actually storm Bodefell Manor itself, which is when we started coming across the 2480-1 entities, which appear to be semi-invisible horrors that only are able to be perceived once the MTF forces are on DMT. Oh, and that's the other thing, is that the MTF Psi-9 personnel, in addition to being trained with asymmetrical warfare and heavy artillery, are also under the effect of DMT.
Love that for them.
That's what I'm saying, Dr. Caleb. Just do the DMT. It's what it's what our supervisor would want. Because I didn't really see it mentioned anywhere else in the article, the closest thing we have to a description of 2480-1s are that they are significantly mutated Homo sapiens, and a vivisection performed showed that a majority of their internal organs, except for the brain, lungs, and heart, were missing, and that the brain itself showed notable deviation, including an enlarged pineal gland, about 8 times the size of a normal pineal gland, and that we currently have ones in containment at biological site, or aren't biological containment area 14, wherever that is.
Yeah. So, as you can see, Citra Acra is kind of the storming the beach of Normandy for this invisible war. And it seemingly worked, because according to Addendum 2480-2, we captured a 2480-1.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty cool. It could speak English, and we're not going to be going over too much of the interrogation. One, because I have been very mindful about doing any drugs, DMT or otherwise, or eating any LSD laced pudding or pizza.
It's okay, we have ways.
And two, Zach is not close enough to me to actually drug me into reading this.
Yeah.
But I do want to pull attention to the end of the interrogation. The interrogation itself is as you would think it would be, just a session of the -1 entity calling us pigs, calling us animals, being aggressive. And then at the end of it, the 2480-1 interrupts the interviewing doctor and says, "I will make you dance, meat puppet. You are a joke to me." At which it breaks its restraints, self-amputating its arms in the process. The entity squirms on the floor towards the ballistic glass. Security and medical personnel dressed in protective hazmat enter the containment unit. Subject is restrained, gagged, and treated for its injuries.
Dr. Caleb, is self-amputation the angriest one can be?
I think yes, but with a caveat, with an asterisk.
Uh-huh.
Because I feel like if you're just ripping your arm off to get out of something, that's one thing. But I'm thinking if you used your teeth to amputate your foot to get out of a restraint, I think that's angrier.
Mm. So it depends on what you cut off.
And how you cut it off.
Yeah, because I am imagining the sheriff at the county line just throwing his arm off in disgust and jumping on it.
Exactly. Or just the entire sawing your foot off in Saw 1.
Yeah.
That guy wasn't angry, he was just trying to survive.
Yeah, true. There is one last addendum on this, noting that in 2014 that there was possible similar activity as in this town cited in Romania, which I kind of believe might be related to the Dracula factory, but that's a tale for another day. But with that, that's pretty much everything written down or documented about 2480. Dr. Caleb, Jesus Christ, that's a long entry.
Yeah, and I do want to quickly put the cart before the wagon here. If you're reading the article, first of all, stop reading it. You probably do not have security clearance for
the
it.
Hatman says hello.
But There is a footnote that says see SCP-2075 and 2095 for presumably related anomalies. We just covered those in the last 2 episodes. We do not have another Tyler situation on our hands. And we have told Zach and I have decided we are not going to be doing anything like that again. So,
For our own
that
sanity.
being said, yes. That being said, Zach, how does this relate to the overall lore of Sarkicism?
So, in a couple ways, most notably is that I believe that they were trying to either summon or commune with Grand Karcist Ion himself, as who some of you may remember from the first episode of this season, being the Meet Jesus Sarkicism, or the founder, being the one who received the power from Yaldabaoth in the first place to revolt against the Davites of Adatum. What's interesting to me about this whole thing is that it also ties into another aspect we covered in that episode about sort of the 2 generalizations of Sarkic cults. One being the traditionalists in more rural areas who have a more like worship by fear approach to Sarkicism in general, and then the more affluent neo-Sarkicisms or Sarkics, who are these affluent, very wealthy people who formed these darkly hedonistic cults, to put it in more agreeable terms. And what's interesting to me in this case is that from various lore segments we have regarding the life and many deaths of Grand Karcist Ion, is that he did fight and I think kill Yaldabaoth in some manner above Siberia, which is how we got the Red Lake. But is that this cult venerates Yaldabaoth, who has an antagonistic role currently in Sarkicism, so I'm not sure exactly if they understand what they're doing, if that makes sense, Doctor.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because it does seem to be this really interesting. From what I remember of your introduction to Sarkicism, both Yaldabaoth and Meet Jesus, Karcist Ion, are not friends.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And if they are invoking Sarkicism, then they might. Then they're using the teachings of Grand Karcist Ion, but invoking Yaldabaoth.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's intentional on their part, or if they don't understand the significance of what they're doing. And so I kind of wonder if the photo we have for KTE-0452 is not necessarily an intentional summoning of Grand Karcist Ion, or if he's coming down because these kids don't know what they're doing, and Dad's mad.
Oh, okay.
That's speculation.
That could be it.
That's speculation on my part, but I mean, I feel like there's enough here to support that reading. So yeah, I don't.
Well, so
I think go ahead.
What I was going to say is the original raid of the Bodfell Manor back in 1952 had 36 bodies. All but 5 of them were in horribly disconfigured and brutal killings. What we've seen from the modern day cult of it, that just happened with Citra Acra, is that these behemoths, these dash ones, are basically just turning them into red mist. So I'm almost curious as to if, at the same time that the GOC was raiding the compound in 52, if Grand Karcist Ion came down and did meat magic, and that's why everything is so fucked up.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like there's maybe something to that, but we also know that Sarkic cults have a wide ability to rearrange people into new shapes, up to including these behemoth entities and the dash ones. So
For sure, for sure.
I think there's no real way to tell if one caused it or the other. I'm led to believe that, or I think that the cult itself, the local cult, is the ones doing the rearranging, just because we know that that's what they can do. I don't think it requires any pseudo divine intervention.
Yeah, yeah, and it's what we saw as well at in Gyros. We saw death and dismemberment in a very similar manner. Now, at the same time, at Gyros, they were seemingly invoking a ritual in and of itself, pressing the big red button, and that is what I gathered as being the reason that it was so fucked up over there. This what was it called, Red Death or something like that?
Yeah, the SCP-610, Red Death.
Right, right. So, yeah, I guess all roads lead back to that, huh?
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about it eventually.
So, I think that it's also important to talk about. There's a movie. It was made back in '89 called Society. And it deals with a very similar premise to this. Not the invisible cult or anything like that, but just like meat magic and stuff like that. And while I was reading this article, I couldn't help but think about this movie. There's this really famous scene in this movie. I think it's called The Shucking or something like that, where it's like this giant orgy, but instead of like there being sex and shit like that, it's like everybody's just melting together. And like somebody's head is on somebody else's ass and stuff
my
like that.
God.
And it's just this horrifying scene. But like that is all I can now think about when it comes to this Bodfell Manor stuff, is the fucking crazy ass parties that unnamed politicians probably went to.
Yeah. There's so much going on here. I'm not entirely sure where to drill down on. But I think where I kind of land on it is that there was a neo-Sarkic cult in Massachusetts in 1952 centered around Bodfell Manor that engaged in these horrible practices, right? I think they were playing at something they didn't necessarily know what was going on with, because at least in terms of at least in the context of the Sarkic religion or cult or belief or whatever you want to call it, that they were using at least clashing iconography between Yaldabaoth and Grand Carsastion. And I don't know if this cult was here, how long exactly this cult was here. Does it predate the town? Did it come with the town? Did it come to the town afterwards? But it clearly had an effect and managed to control a lot of the aspects of the town, whether or not the majority of the town people realized it at the time or were aware of it, subconsciously or consciously. But over time, the town shifted into what could best be described as a Lovecraftian eldritch nightmare a la Innsmouth. And then that's kind of where we came in, engaged in a shadow war with the cultists. And I guess that's kind of where we're at now, is that the cult is at least largely subdued. We took over Bodfell Manor, but I mean, what did we actually win here? There are still monsters running around. The locals are, the locals that are described with kids eating dead dogs in the street. Was it worth it?
Yeah, it is interesting because this doesn't strike me as being purely Sarkic as far as what we've talked about. Like the other two SCPs that we've talked about in regards to Sarkicism, both the Siege of Garrus and the old dude, they both deal with meat magic in some way or shape or form, or disease, or things like that. And while there is a lot of that going on with chitinous towers and big fleshy behemoths, there's also a note here, and it's struck through, and I don't know if that's because they disproved it or something like that, but there's Bodfell Manor itself is non-Euclidean.
Hmm.
Um, and it seems like there's additional rooms that just pop up and things like that. And even in the DMT testing, they were running back to try to get back into the cellar, and they couldn't find it. So, and that's with the DMT that would cause you to see this stuff if it was happening. So thus I'm hypothesizing that there's got to be a little bit more than just Sarkic magic going on here, and maybe that's from Yaldabaoth, and invoking that magic itself. But yeah, this is a very, very confusing SCP. My question to you is, where do you think that Simon Oswalt fits into this, the site director of Site 13?
Oh, I think he went native.
You think he went native?
Yeah, I think he drank the Kool-Aid and joined the cult, or at least succumbed to it in some way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the article would say if they found him or anything like that.
Honestly, like, my pet theory is that the interviewed SCP-1 is,
Was
him. And sadly, this isn't uncommon. We've lost site directors like this in the past, where they succumb to the same thing that they were said to contain. It's a tale as old as time. Because, I mean, if you spend all your time around a thing that can convert you and corrupt you, it's probably eventually going to win.
For sure. I was just reading over the interview, and the -1 does say, it was soon after my appointment to Site 13, soon after I was made aware of the Foundation's dossier on me. A mirthless bureaucrat without known family or friends, to be director at the inconsequential Site 13. So I guess, yes, the interview was of Simon Oswalt, and I missed that.
It's all good. This was a really long reading session, probably longer than you and I really want to do, to be honest. So it's probably there's probably one or two other finer points that we missed, and that's just kind of how that has to be.
It is interesting. Zach, what can you tell me about Adatum?
Adatum was the capital of the Devite Empire prior to the Sarkic revolution, for lack of a better term, and sort of control of Adatum before its inevitable destruction, though there's a lot more to that statement. And so what I want to make clear is that Adatum may or may not still be extant in our reality. I don't say timeline, and I want you to know that that is specifically chosen.
Yeah, so I wonder, because the cult is named Adatum's Wake.
Yeah.
I'm almost wondering if they're trying to invoke Adatum coming through the veil, and I don't know why the fuck they would pick Massachusetts of all places, but in Massachusetts.
Can't make it much worse.
I guess so. It probably raised the property value.
I don't know. I feel like the choice for using Adatum in the name of the cult might be similar to like in how in mainstream religions they'll take the names of like holy places like Gilboa or Jerusalem and stick the name in there. Again, I think that it's either that or they were just choosing a name that was related to sarcasm. But I don't know how.
100%.
I don't know how deeply to read into that, because I personally don't believe that these guys were, true scholars of the faith, as it were.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I wonder if later SCPs that we're going to talk about this season will also get into Neo-Sarkicism, because we've seen a bunch of Proto-Sarkicism with Siege Gyros and the old fuck. The Way of All Flesh is the name of that one. But those are guys, those are SCPs, and those are guys that have been practicing for a really long time. And this is our first kind of Neo-Sarkic cult. And I wonder if the Neo-Sarkics kind of gravitate towards a little bit of column A, column B with Yaldabaoth and Grand Carcastion.
I mean, they might. I mean, they aren't necessarily as tied to tradition and quote unquote the old ways as the proto-Sarkics.
Exactly.
So they may not understand or appreciate or even care about the differences between certain facets of the faith or not. And also, it's worth pointing out that the people listed out in this article, elite politicians, industrial magnates, millionaires, and billionaires, are a class of people that are used to having power and actively look for ways to increase their power. So if they get more power by doing this kooky religion, then why wouldn't they do it? So maybe what I'm accusing some of these people of being are like Sunday Sarkics.
Right.
Just because it's convenient, and there's a lot to be said about converting to the religion where it's not good, but you also know that it works.
Yeah. It's just it's a really confusing entry. I don't think I've ever left an SCP with more questions than I walked into it with. And as I'm standing,
every time we read one.
and as I'm standing here in what can only be described as the hellscape, formerly known as Massachusetts, I don't really know what to make of this. Yeah, it's interesting.
Like going back to the beginning, the object class for this is presumed neutralized, but we still have emanation events. So I don't know. I guess I wouldn't say. I feel like there's a case to make this still classified as Keter, or at the very least Euclid, because there are still these anomalous hazardous events that happen. So I don't think we fully understand what's going on with the town, or even and not to be a parody of myself, but in previous entries where I suppose that something else is the actual anomaly, I think 2480 is a case of like there are so many things that could be actual anomalies that I'm not sure this is one anomaly so much as it is a collection of several things going on, regardless of the initiating or inciting incident.
No, 100%. I was going to make that same joke about how you always overblow things, but I think originally Bodfell Manor was SCP-2480, and then as we get more information about Bodfell Manor, we realize that there's a lot more going on. Now it's this dimensional anomaly. And so I think that these cases of things happening similar in Romania could be classified under the same thing. They could be 2480, and it's just this dimensional anomaly that pops up and then starts doing meat magic. So, yeah, with that, do you have anything else that you really want to touch on with this?
No, I mean, I think a lot of it, as much as it can anyway, speaks for itself. But this is one where you kind of stop reading where you want to, just because there's no real answers about what's going on with any of this. Beyond the fact that there was a Sarkic cult, it's probably still there in some way, as are all of these Sarkic entities and emanations and hazardous anomalies. We think the big one's gone, but what do we know?
And holy shit, is this just like a really cool entry to read through? If you have the clearance level, please read through this article on your own. This is such a, like, you think you have it figured out in like 2 paragraphs and you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And then all of a sudden it takes a random left turn. You're like, whoa, this is a lot bigger than I thought. And that happens like 6 times over the course of this article. You're like, oh, okay, it's just this cult that practices some really weird shit, and, does some kidnapping and stuff. And then it's like, oh, wait, no, there's, people are randomly exploding and spontaneously combusting. That's creepy as hell. And now it's like, oh, now there's these big fleshy behemoths, and it's so crazy. And now you have to take DMT.
Yeah, and it's just like, I don't know, do what you want with that, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, Zach, what are we covering next week?
So next week we are talking about SCP-2133. File name, Our Land, Our Bondage.
Yeah, so look forward to more flesh stuff. And if you want to find out more about my fleshy co-host, Zach, where can they find you?
They can
Segways.
We're excellent at them. They can find me on my personal blog of Roll for Writing, which is located at makeawritingcheck.blogspot.com, or they can find my video projects over on Roll for Writing Presents on YouTube.
Awesome. You can find me at Calica1738 on Twitter and Instagram. As well, you can find me on YouTube at Calica and Twitch at Calica Plays, where I've just, last week started doing anything that is not related to this stuff. In the meantime, you can find the podcast on Twitter at SCPod_cast. You can find us on Instagram at SCPod.cast. We are available on Spotify and YouTube. I have given up on all other ones. And please remember to do the shill things, follow, rate the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, anything that you can do. Sharing this with your friends as well, or people that you might know. Share it with your dog, share it with your mother, share it with the random stranger that you just met on the street. And that really helps us get the word out to people that might actually like us and might want to hear some...
Share it with your DMT hallucinations.
Yes, exactly. Share it with your personal hat guy. And in the meantime, Zach, what words of unwisdom do you have for us this week?
I believe in the tall bees, sure, but do the tall bees believe in me?
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.